This is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. Israel's main labour union calls a general strike amid growing anger at the government after the bodies of 6 more hostages are recovered from Gaza. The fighting in parts of Gaza pauses as hundreds of thousands of people are vaccinated against polio. Leaders from African nations are arriving in Beijing for the Forum on China-Africa cooperation. And the polls have closed in 2 eastern German states, with populist parties expected to have surged in the vote. So within the past hour, Israel's main labour union has called for a general strike on Monday, which will see the country's main airport, Ben Gurion, close. Their aim is to pressure the government to secure a deal to bring home the remaining Israeli hostages held in Gaza. It comes after the bodies of 6 hostages were recovered from the enclave. They were found in a tunnel in the southern Rafah area. Israel's military said that they were killed just a short time before troops reached them. Our correspondent Jonathan Regev is in Tel Aviv. So, Jonathan, what more do we know about these hostages and the operation to try and save them?
These 6 bodies were recovered from a tunnel in the Rafah area, southern Gaza Strip, and not far from another tunnel where a hostage was actually found alive last week. Forces are calling it the same underground infrastructure. And what is really angering here in Israel is the fact that these hostages, all 6 of them, were taken to Gaza alive, and all 6 of them were alive at least until Thursday. The forensic evidence shows that they've been killed somewhere in the past 48 to 72 hours, meaning they survived as captives, as hostages, for nearly 11 months. And just days before the forces reached their location, they were shot and killed. There's great anger on Hamas. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying this morning, how can you say on one hand that you want to deal, and on the other hand you kill your living hostages, your strongest asset? That is the sentiment in Israel. This is on one hand. These bodies were recovered last night from the tunnel and transferred for Israel for identification, and then the families got the notice. While there's, of course, great anger on Hamas, there's also huge anger on the Israeli government. That controversial vote on Thursday to remain in the Philadelphia corridor was described by Defense Minister Yoav Gallant as a disgrace, was described by him as a decision that is nothing less than a death penalty for the remaining living hostages. It was just 48 hours after that vote in which this actually became true. People who were alive on Thursday were dead on Saturday.
And as you say, this has sparked further outrage over Benjamin Netanyahu's failure to bring home the rest of the remaining hostages, with the general strike now called for Monday, announced in the past couple of hours.
Correct, and this could be a game changer. The biggest workers' union in Israel has declared a general strike as of 6 a.m. local time. That's 11 hours from now, and it includes Ben Gurion Airport, which will be shut tomorrow at 8 a.m. And the head of this workers' union, for 11 months since the war began, he has been called again and again to declare a general strike to try and put a pressure on the government. Time and time again, he said, no, we do not use this weapon of general strike so easily. But the feeling now is that enough is enough. The feeling now is that we have 6 hostages who could have been saved, but they're not. Sources say that at least 3 from these 6 were actually on a list provided by Hamas as hostages, which can be exchanged in case of a ceasefire deal. 2 of them are women. 1 more is a person who was injured while he was abducted back in October. 3 of them were in this list. Now, of course, they returned home only dead. And if we look at the past 2 weeks, 12 people who were abducted alive were found, only their bodies were found and brought back to Israel. The public is saying, the workers' union is saying, the hostage families are saying, here we have 12 people who were abducted to Gaza alive, who were alive and could have been returned home alive, but they were killed. They only returned home as dead bodies, and this sparks great anger on the government. And this is what probably prompted the workers' union, the biggest workers' union in Israel, to declare the general strike, which will begin, I say again, at 6 a.m. local time, 11 hours from now.
OK, Jonathan, thanks so much for that. Jonathan Regev there in Tel Aviv. And our Gaza correspondent Akram Al-Sashri has the latest now from Khan Yunis.
Hamas is not only denying responsibility for that incident, Hamas is rather accusing the Israeli forces, the Israeli Prime Minister and the American President for being the cause of that thing that happened, that is hurting for the Israelis, and that is also catastrophic for the Palestinians, who are hoping that those people would be released eventually after an exchange deal is agreed upon. There is no third source that would be able, in the meantime, to identify the cause of the death. The only source is Israel, and I think when Hamas is accusing them, they totally understand that it is the narrative that has been provided by the Israeli army that has been actively operating in the area of Rafah and Khan Yunis, and the Israeli army that has failed several other times to protect Israeli captives, and they ended up even gunning down those Israeli captives, like it happened in Ash-Shaja'iyya 3 months ago, when they were calling for help and calling for saving their lives, and they ended up being injured and killed by the Israeli army that was supposed to be securing their life and saving them and bringing them back home to their families. The situation is extremely catastrophic, and it will not be someone's final say unless forensic investigation has been done and a decision has been concluded about the reason of the death of those people. And when it comes to the political front as well, Hamas is accusing the Israeli Prime Minister and the American President for being the cause of this, because they have long procrastinated the expected exchange deal. They were asked to expedite the process. They were asked to release the Palestinians. And I'm repeating the statements. I'm repeating the analogy that has been provided by Hamas, by the Palestinians, by the other factions, and even by journalists. They have long procrastinated, and they would not accept even to allow the Palestinians to come back to their homes in the Gaza North. They have not been accepting to properly negotiate over the fate of 4,700 Palestinians who are in Israeli jails for extended years. And eventually the Israeli army has been freely moving in Gaza, and they, according to the Palestinians, were the ones who have been the culprit of such an incident.
And let's turn to the rollout of the polio vaccine. How is that going so far in Gaza?
According to the statements that were made by the UN spokesperson and the UN media officers, the polio vaccination campaign was rolled out peacefully with minimum incidents whatsoever, and then they are hoping that this calm would be maintained for 3 coming days, and then during the onset of the second and third stage in northern and southern Gaza Strip. They said the calm was there, and that calm helped and facilitated the entry and access of families and hundreds of the children to the different primary health care clinics for the sake of just getting the vaccine. And they're hoping that there would be a ceasefire that would allow full operation that would be targeting the Palestinians. And they said that it's not only the polio virus that has been risking the life of the Palestinians, there is also the hepatitis A, and they were calling for full ceasefire for the sake of the UNRWA being able to reach the Palestinians and offer the needed vaccination for the different kinds of diseases.
Akram Al-Sashri in Gaza there. Well, the mass polio vaccinations come after Israel and Hamas agreed to a series of 3-day localized pauses in fighting. Around 1.26 million doses of the vaccine are already in Gaza, with 400,000 additional shots due to arrive soon. The goal is to vaccinate over 600,000 children under the age of 10. The inoculations started in central Gaza on Sunday and will last for 3 days. During each stage, fighting will pause between 6 a.m. and 3 p.m. local time. Amar is the Regional Chief of Advocacy and Communication for UNICEF Middle East and North Africa.
We are receiving the same information from our teams on the ground that it's going well. There is a big turnaround of families and children who are really eager, to take the polio vaccination because they understand the threat that this virus poses to their children's health. And for the first day, I think it has went quite well. I think there will be the whole teams, the three organizations and the partners will convene at the end of the day to see what went well and how to continue the successful day for the upcoming days in central Gaza, and then to move to the south, to North Gaza and as well to the south of Gaza.
And how have the United Nations agencies, by which I mean the WHO, UNICEF and UNRWA, how have they split the workload when it comes to this difficult process of carrying out vaccinations in Gaza?
Yeah, indeed, it is a huge task considering, the challenges that in place. So for the UNICEF, we were in charge of the procurement of the vaccines, the supply chain, the delivery of vaccines as well into Gaza, in addition to the cold chain storage. And in addition to that, we have the engagement teams. We have teams on the ground who are speaking and talking to the communities about how to give them information about the vaccine, the threat of the vaccine, awareness campaigns, how to protect themselves. In addition to that, as well, the locations where these vaccines could be taken so that the families can understand and know where they can take, their children to which places that are closest to them, right? And in addition to that, for UNRWA, the vaccination center, they have vaccination centers and mobile teams that are vaccinating the children in the different UNRWA shelters. And for WHO as well, they are in charge of the different technical aspects from validating the vaccines, monitoring the situation on the ground, and the implementation as well roll out in collaboration with the Ministry of Health. So it's really a very close coordination mechanism to ensure that more than 645,000 children are reached. And it's really vital that to ensure that 90% coverage is reached as well to ensure that the virus we can stop the transmission of the virus.
Ukraine has carried out one of the biggest drone strike attacks yet on Russia, targeting Russian energy infrastructure. The overnight strikes caused fires to break out at the Moscow oil refinery, as well as the nearby Konakovo power station, one of central Russia's biggest energy plants. Russian officials say more than 150 drones were brought down elsewhere across the country. Meanwhile, Russian forces have captured 2 settlements in eastern Ukraine, according to local news agencies. Moscow is continuing to make advances in the Donetsk region as it pushes towards the Ukrainian logistics hub of Pokrovsk. Kiev's top commander has described the situation in the east as difficult, with the fighting there exceptionally tough. And you're watching CGTN. Still ahead. The polls have closed in 2 eastern German states, with populist parties expected to have surged in the vote.
Welcome to This Way Forward.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story, wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
This week on Razor, using radar to image the aurora to help us understand the energy coming from our sun.
We send a pulse to the ionosphere. So the electromagnetic wave from the pulse that we send up, it excites the electrons in the ionosphere, and then the electrons start wiggling. and then they send the signal back.
Hello, welcome back. Our headlines again. Israel's main labour union calls for a general strike amid growing anger at the government after the bodies of 6 more hostages were recovered from Gaza. And fighting in parts of Gaza pauses as hundreds of thousands are vaccinated against polio. Leaders from more than 40 African countries are arriving in Beijing for the summit of the Forum of China-Africa Cooperation. The President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, the President of the Seychelles, Wavel Ramakalawan, and the President of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, Teodoro Obiang, are among the latest arrivals. This week's summit will focus on investment in key areas such as infrastructure, agriculture and clean energy. Well, Uganda is gradually increasing its production of renewable energy. The East African country has partnered with Chinese companies to build green power sources, one of them the 600-megawatt Karuma hydropower dam. Our correspondent Leon Senyangi reports.
Along the Nile River in northern Uganda lies the country's latest power-generating installation. Construction of the Karuma hydropower station started in 2013 and obtained its project completion certificate this year.
It's also the biggest hydropower station in Uganda. When we came in 2013, and it's generally, we all understand that Uganda is a developing country, and especially in the hydropower area. So after its completion, it will add almost 40% of the power capability.
The power plant cost an estimated $1.7 billion. 85% of that was financed by the Export-Import Bank of China, 15% by the Ugandan government.
China's financing focuses on how to better the technical mechanism to ensure the project's own sustainability and their intended socio-economic benefits for upgrading local industries and improving people's livelihoods.
The financial boost has got the station up and running. And this is where the power is generated, 600 megawatts that can be added to the national grid. That is expected to considerably rise Uganda's generation capacity. Uganda has an installed hydropower capacity of 1,510 megawatts. The government says that the potential increase to 2,000 megawatts will be critical in meeting the country's increasing demand for electricity.
People are yearning. They have maize mills, coffee factories. Power is either not there or it's not enough. And they are using diesel generators, and yet we want clean energy.
The Karuma hydropower station is one of the models of cooperation between China and Uganda in the energy sector. And with the Uganda government planning to scale up access and distribution of power to neighboring countries, progressive collaboration has shown promise for more energy infrastructure. Leon Senyangi, CGTN, Karuma, northern Uganda.
The polls have just closed in 2 eastern German states, Thuringia and Saxony. Chancellor Olaf Scholz's ruling party coalition is facing challenges from the far-right AfD party and the left-wing BSW. Many predict a surge of populist parties. A victory in these state elections could pave the way for next year's federal elections. Our correspondent Peter Oliver is inside the Parliament of Thuringia State and joins us now. So, Peter, what's the latest from the exit polls?
Hi. Right, well, if the exit polls are to, if the actual final results are to follow the exit polls, then there have been major gains for the far-right Alternative for Germany party. There's also going to be some massive headaches when it comes to trying to form a government out of the numbers that have been put forward. We'll start off in the state of Saxony, where 120 seats in their parliament were up for grabs. The AfD posting 31.5% there, according to these latest exit polls. That's up 4% on 2019. The Conservative Christian Democratic Union on 32%. They were the overall winners. But if we look at the Green Party in the state of Saxony, they've dropped 3.5%, just back to the 5% threshold to keep a seat in the Landtag, in the state parliament. If the exit polls are to follow the sign of the main results are to follow the exit polls, there will be no Free Democrats, who are also part of the ruling coalition nationally in the state of Saxony, but they weren't there already. They're predicted to get around 1%. Chancellor Scholz's Social Democrats, 7.5%. Now, here in Thuringia, in Erfurt, where I'm speaking to you from, massive gains for the far-right Alternative for Germany. We are looking at 33.5 according to these exit polls. That would be an increase of 10 points for the far-right AfD. What that would mean is, because those have to come from somewhere, is it would mean that the Greens would be out of the parliament here in Erfurt. They would get 4% according to this exit poll. The Free Democrats, again, not featuring in this part of the country. The Union, the Conservative Union of the Christian Democratic Union, I beg your pardon, 24.5%. Ultimately, what all those numbers mean is, unless somebody goes back, or one of these parties goes back on one of the promises that they've made to not work with either the far-right AfD or the far-left BSW, there is no way to make a 50% majority government in either state. So there is certainly, we'll be keeping an eye on those final results, but there's certainly going to have to be some working out between the politicians if we are to see any real results of a government anytime soon in these two votes.
Very interesting. So it does seem the AfD has really done very well. What could that mean for national elections?
Well, we're just over a year away from those national elections. Olaf Scholz's Social Democrats never expected to do too well in this part of the country in the east, but this has been a real shellacking for the coalition government, that three-way coalition. The 28th of September 2025 is the date for the federal elections. Currently, it does look as if the Christian Democratic Union and the Christian Social Union down in Bavaria would be the largest party, but these gains for AfD show that they are set to be a massive force when it comes nationally. Also BSW as well, who need to be pointed out, have come out. This is their first time contesting these state elections. It will be their first federal election next year. They've posted solid numbers of 11.5% according to the exit polls in Saxony, and 14.5% here in Thuringia. Ultimately, what we will most likely see is AfD continue to campaign on their anti-immigration, anti-Islam mandate that they've been going for throughout this campaign. Of course, if you cast your mind back just a couple of weeks ago, there was a terrible, tragic stabbing that took place in Solingen in North Rhine-Westphalia. Now, that has been used massively by the AfD in campaigning, and it left 3 people dead, 8 people seriously wounded. We have seen that being on the stump from AfD politicians as they've been campaigning. Expect more of that heading into those elections next year. We do, of course, have another important state election in the state of Brandenburg, also in the east of the country, and also expected to see major gains for the AfD coming up on the 22nd of September.
Peter, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for that. That's Peter Oliver in Germany. No survivors have been found after a helicopter crashed in Russia's far east Kamchatka Peninsula. Officials say the helicopter disappeared from radar shortly after takeoff. 22 passengers were on board, most of them tourists. The peninsula is popular because of its landscape, and it's now been downgraded to a tropical cyclone. Japan's meteorological agency continues to warn of landslides, floods and rising water levels in rivers across the country after record rainfall. China continues its winning ways on day 4 of the Paralympics. Yang Yue won the gold medal in the women's discus throw F64, and teammate Yao Zhuan also took the silver medal in her 6th Paralympic Games. Mexico came 3rd for bronze. China won gold in the table tennis men's doubles MD14 after beating Thailand in the final. Hosts France took bronze. And let's take a look at the medal table then, where China are still top with 26 golds, 21 silvers and 8 bronze. Great Britain is next with 19 golds. Brazil is in third with 8 golds, ahead of the US and France. Bike safety in Brussels is going downhill with a sharp spike in thefts recorded over the past few years. But major initiatives from both the private and public sectors are in the works to make sure that the Belgian capital keeps pace with its mobility targets. Our correspondent William Denslow reports.
When it comes to bike safety, this Brussels-based company isn't trying to reinvent the wheel. But through its patented technology, Locky wants to give bike owners a true sense of security. Using a Locky station at one of its 9 locations costs around $1 per hour, or about $16 for a monthly subscription. Insurance for your bike is included, for extra peace of mind.
It's not a stainless steel arm like you have on the U-Lock. We have developed a material that's almost impossible to cut it through. If you try to cut it through, it's actually the disc of the angle grinder itself that will get destroyed.
More people are now cycling in Brussels, but security is believed to be a major reason why many aren't getting back on the saddle. According to security agency Safe Brussels, reported bike thefts here in the Belgian capital rose more than 70% between 2015 and 2022. There are fears that mobility targets. The city aims to increase the number of cyclists on the roads threefold by 2030 compared to 2018. The introduction of major parking sites like this is a key part of the plan. More than 13,000 residents are currently on the waiting list for a parking spot.
More than 600 bikes can park here safely. We also increased the safety around the whole building. And so there are a number of these kind of big parkings in the center of the city.
Officials say safety is being improved for bikes, but also for riders too.
A lot of people want to bike, and safety is one of the main concerns of why people won't bike. And if safety is improved, then you have more cyclists on the road.
The city hopes reduced speed limits for motorists and more extensive bike lanes will achieve just that. But improving parking infrastructure could be key to getting a handle on bike thefts in the city. William Denslow, CGTN, Brussels.
And finally, it may not be an Olympic sport, but it is certainly a test of stamina, strength and sheer guts. The Dutch tradition of canal vaulting dates back centuries. And this weekend, 2,000 spectators turned out to watch the national championships. The sport has its roots in agriculture, when farmers used vaulting poles, to cross the country's many waterways to get between their fields. By the 1700s, it had been turned into a competitive sport. This year's Fjälljapan champions scored a winning distance of more than 16 metres in the women's category and more than 21 metres in the men's. And a last look at the headlines. Israel's main labour union calls a general strike amid growing anger at the government after the bodies of 6 more hostages are recovered from Gaza. The fighting in parts of Gaza pauses as hundreds of thousands are vaccinated against polio. And leaders from African nations are arriving in Beijing for the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. That is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news at the top of the hour coming up next. It's Razor. For now, from all the team here in London,